In preparing for this, I spoke with several people on our board who have been helpful, and I was actually having a great conversation with Linda Henry over the weekend, and she stated, as she was looking forward to your joining us, that you and your company have quite literally saved the world. And so, changed the world, and so I appreciate that as sort of an umbrella of what we're going to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the past, but I'm very excited about the future, as we've discussed, in terms of what Moderna and your technologies mean for the future of healthcare. But let me start at the beginning. Before joining Moderna, you were the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, bioMérieux. I'd like to clear up my...
bioMérieux.
Just like I phrased it. Thank you, Governor. I appreciate that. But you decided to leave that multi-billion-dollar company with thousands of employees to become employee number 2 for a nascent company. You admitted, obviously, that it was a little crazy and that you thought that this new technology had about a 5% chance of working. So what made you make this leap of faith for Moderna?
Well, first, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here and to see so many friends today. So it was initially a tough decision to contemplate, joining this startup company. And then the more I thought about it, the more it became actually pretty simple, because it could change the world, it could change medicine forever, but it was very unlikely it was going to work. You need to know, when the first time Noubar Afeyan from Flagship, that many of you know, talked to me about the idea of Moderna, my reaction was, this is never going to work. This goes against everything we've learned in biology over the last 40 plus years. mRNA is very unstable, mRNA is immunogenic, it gives you immune reaction. Those are not good things for a drug. But then it was a notion that if this was going to work, we're going to be able to do drugs that nobody else can do. Most of the drugs we work on were going to work because we always use the same chemical components. As you know, in pharmaceutical company, most drugs fail because every time it's a new product, different chemical that you put into the human body. But in our case, between the vaccine against COVID that many of you in the room got and the CMV vaccine and the flu vaccine coming, it's exactly 100% the same chemicals. So what your body is going to see is exactly the same stuff. And your body, for the first few dozens of minutes, will not even know it's a flu vaccine that is going to look like the COVID vaccine. It's only when it's going to get inside your cells that it will be different. The third piece that was clear to us, because it's always the same things, is the speed was going to be mind-blowing. And I think the world got a good proof of that in 2020. And it was going to be highly scalable manufacturing-wise. I mean, the piece that most people don't appreciate, and the governor was kind enough to spend time with us at our facility in Norwood. In 2019, we made 100,000 doses. In 2021, we made 800 million doses. So just think about my manufacturing team. So think about the face of my head of manufacturing, Juan, who is a saint, and has literally carried the world on his shoulder and his team over the last 2 years. When in January 2020, when it became clear to me it was going to be a pandemic, like 1918 flu pandemic, that I set the goal of a team to make 1 billion doses. And he told me, we made 100,000 doses last year. I'm like, yes, I know. Stop wasting time. How do we make 1 billion doses next year? Because time was going to be the essence. And so all those things were what went through my head as I was contemplating this opportunity with Noubar. And I was 39 years old, I had a great job, I didn't want to leave it. But I'm like, this might be the one time in my life where I could have a chance to do something spectacular in terms of impact. I was raised by the Jesuits, all my life, so serving is a big part of who I am. And so if I could use, my time on this planet to do something that could help medicine forever, not for one drug, but forever, it was a good thing. And my wife helped me get to the last mile because like, you have to do it. So we're talking about it, and at some stage of a discussion over a few weeks, like, you must do this. I'm like, why? Because shit, now I have to do it. And she's like, because you're so relentless, you're so stubborn, that if somebody has a chance to make this thing work, that has 5% chance of working, you have a chance. But you have to do it.
It's fascinating to think about your perception as you were starting out and your vision for recognizing what was needed. And then in 2020, when it hit the fan and we realized this was a serious pandemic, that you had built a company that in a culture that was at least prepared for the onslaught that you were about to bring to the company to go from 100,000 to the million. You know, that's an audacious goal that you laid out. How did you build that framework within the company so that as you grew from 300 to 2,000 employees in a matter of months, that you maintained that culture and you maintained an attitude? I know that you talk about sort of the 10X mindset, but tell me a little bit about sort of how you needed to prepare the ground for this impending avalanche.
Sure. So the piece where we got lucky at Moderna since we started is it made no sense this was going to be a one-drug company. As you know, most biotech companies who make it, and most unfortunately don't, end up having one drug, and it's hard to find, okay, what's the next drug? Well, because mRNA is an information molecule, because we use the same chemical components for everything, it made zero scientific sense. This was going to be a one-drug company. It was going to be zero because we'll go bankrupt, because we will run out of money before we made the technology work into the clinic and launch a product, or it will be a lot. And when I mean a lot, I mean hundreds of drugs. I'm convinced this will be a company, and I will be retired, that will have hundreds of drugs. Approved, I mean, impacting patients, not in the labs. And so put yourself in our shoes as we build this company. Because it was going to be zero or a lot, we obsessed about scale. How do you scale this company? How do you invest in digital, in robotics? Because our goal has always been to impact the maximum number of patients in the next 10 to 20 years, which is what I care about. I don't care about next quarter, I care about next 10 to 20 years.
Yep.
Is how do you get on that trajectory? And when you start to ask those questions, you realize that your ability to scale is your biggest enemy.
And so I want to come back to mRNA and the technology and the science, but one last question before we do return to that. In 2020, it became obvious that there was a requirement of a public and private partnership to get there. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be and how that helped the success of fighting off this pandemic?
Sure. So initially, it was very organic. You know, we had the chance to know Dr. Fauci and his team very well. Of course, we know the FDA because they have to approve everything that goes into a clinic. And this was not our first vaccine. This was our 9th vaccine in clinical studies. You know, we had worked with BARDA on the Zika vaccine that is in a clinic and moving forward. And so we knew all those players. And so the way the whole thing evolved is I was made aware of a virus just before New Year of 2019, 2020. And so we started working on it, thinking it was going to be an outbreak like Zika or Ebola. And it's only the week of January 20th of 2020, it became so clear it was going to be a pandemic. And actually, I was in Switzerland, I was at Davos. I was supposed to go to Germany on the board. I canceled everything. I bought a one-way ticket to DC, and I did Zurich to DC. And literally that Monday morning, I met Dr. Fauci and his team at 8 a.m. I went to DARPA, I went to BARDA, I went to the FDA in the afternoon. And we're just starting to figure out, okay, what are all the pieces we need? And it was kind of just problem solving. That's what do you need to happen and who can do what? Because our worst enemy is time. Because, you know, viruses, you know, grow exponentially. And so you cannot think linearly, which is what human brains do. Our brain wants to think linearly. But you have to just do the math and look at the timelines because every day is going to matter. And what I was already dreading in January 2020 was the fall of 2020, winter 21. Because being a respiratory virus, it was very clear to me that what was going to happen in the first half of 2020 was going to be a walk in the park compared to what's coming next winter. Because as the virus was spreading everywhere and was going to come back, and as we spent time indoors, the big problem was going to be next winter. So our goal was, how do we get a vaccine in the fall? My first question to the FDA when I walked to the meeting that week of January 2020, I asked them, how do we get a vaccine approved for September? And they looked at me like I was coming from Mars. Like, what vaccine? where is it? Where is the data? I'm like, I've not even made it yet. The team was making it in Cambridge, in Norwood. And she's like, where's the vaccine? She's like, this is never going to happen. And so it was this very informal just way to solve things together. Like Dr. Fauci and his team, they ran all the blood work for us through the clinical studies. Why? Because they had the capabilities to do that, and it enabled me to use my scientists to do something else that was part of the puzzle. The big push, of course, was Operation Warp Speed, which was a godsend for us because we didn't have the money. I could not have paid the clinical study that we ended up doing. I just didn't have the cash. And so that was super helpful. And then the piece that we forgot, one of the great things about this country, which is I asked every government in the world to help us for manufacturing. Because the media was amazing at portraying the race of a clinic, the phase 1, the phase 2, the phase 3 of everybody. But nobody talked about manufacturing. And I spent all my time losing sleep on manufacturing. And we asked everybody to help us for capital. No government in the world helped us, and I called everybody. I asked every big foundation to help us. Even $10 million I will take, I'll buy a machine. Nobody gave us a penny. And on May 18, when we had the phase 1 data, we actually raised $1.3 billion on the NASDAQ that night. And Morgan Stanley was amazing because James Gorman, the CEO, said, I don't want you to do a roadshow. Like, James, I need to raise $1.3 billion. I need to do a roadshow. He's like, nope, the bank will take the whole deal. And so the bank bought everything that night, so we don't have time to waste, spend a week on a roadshow. And that's the capital we used, 100% for manufacturing, buy machines, buy raw materials. Because imagine the face of our suppliers, where I will walk to them and say, I need 10,000 times more product. Not 10%, I need 10,000 times more product. And so many of them freaked out that if a vaccine would fail in the clinic, we would go bankrupt. And all the things we ordered from them, we will never pay them. And for some of them, it will mean bankruptcy.
It's remarkable to think about sort of that behind the scenes that was, some of us paid attention to some of that, but to think about the manufacturing challenges, because everyone was, do we have a vaccine and where is it? My wife is in sort of clinical trial work, and I understand slightly that process. It was flabbergasted sort of the speed, but to think about the manufacturing increase that needed to happen to make it available worldwide. So let's talk about the mRNA technology. Obviously, I don't have the scientific background that Tony does. My science is this much better than my French. But could you tell me why that technology, that platform is so effective against COVID and its variants that are here?
Sure. So the first bit, of course, was the speed, which we talk about, which was so necessary in a pandemic. But we should not forget the value of the speed is going to have on all those other vaccines and drugs we are developing, because people are hurting, people are dying. And so that's an incredible feature of the technology. I think the piece to think about is mRNA is like information. At the end of the day, it looks a bit crazy. And when I said that 10 years ago, I looked really crazy. And there was some not so good article about how we were like the Theranos of the East Coast with some reporters.
Tell us more.
At the end of the day, mRNA is a piece of information. It's a piece of software. You have a lot of mRNA in every one of your cells, and I do too. And the reason it's so effective with vaccine is, as you all know, SARS-CoV-2 is an mRNA virus. And so when you think about this technology, we engineered a way to safely get inside your cells a piece of code who codes the spike protein, in the case of that vaccine, of a virus. It's the entire 100%, the full-length spike protein, which is very big. It's 4 kilobytes. It's pretty big. But the way it's made in your cells is exactly the way the SARS-CoV-2 virus will produce itself in your cells. Because the virus, unlike a bacteria, has no cell. It's just a piece of information. So it gets inside human cells when you get infected. It gets in your cell. It uses the ribosome, which for those that have not done biology in a long time, is like a little 3D printer that is going to read the message and make a protein by adding amino acid after amino acid. But it's done exactly in a human cell, like if it was a natural infection. But we don't give you a virus. We just give you instruction for one of the protein of a virus. And so the way it's seen by your immune system is exactly if you got infected. And so that's why the quality of the neutralizing antibodies, the quality of the T-cell response is very strong.
It's fascinating, and as I was reading up on the science, I read that your chief scientific officer defined Moderna as an iPhone, in which there are many apps, which can be vaccines and therapeutics that can be launched, and that your job is to copy code and put it into these apps to release them. And I thought that was a fascinating way to think about it. Does that then play a role in sort of its ability to adapt to just about anything, whether it's different strains or other vaccines and therapeutics?
And that's a piece about the technology that sometimes, having been in big pharma myself, feels a bit like cheating, which is once you get the technology to work, and it was 10 years of hard work, and a lot of things not working for 10 years, and $3 billion of investment in science before the virus existed. But once you get all the pieces of the technology to work, then the next one feels like cheating. I mean, as has been reported in the media, it took us 48 hours to develop the vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. We never had access to a physical virus. We didn't need to. We got the sequence of a virus online. But the true story is it took us 10 minutes. So why did we say 48 hours if it really took us 10 minutes? Because my team freaked out. They were done in 10 minutes. And I told them, are you sure that's the right one? Because it's going in a human in 60 days. And all my scientists panicked. Because usually they can work in mice and monkeys and they have their time. What is going to go in a human? I said, guys, there's an outbreak out there. What you design? And so they spent 2 days. I said, take the time you need, but the one you design, it has to work. And so they went back and we ran the 3D configuration of structure of protein, and they look at all the literature on, SARS and MERS to make sure that they were picking the right one. But literally, it took them 10 minutes to design the product.
10 minutes to design and 47 hours plus to beta test their idea.
Just check it, and challenge each other and make sure that it was the right construct.
So what is the next thing that you are going to have Moderna focus on in terms of addressing with this technology and this new way of looking at healthcare and medicine?
So the first big thing for us, let's start with vaccines, because most people don't realize there are 225 viruses that hurt humans. There are vaccines against 25. There's a big opportunity to have a big impact on health. So our first priority is to get an annual iPhone-like booster for all the respiratory disease. You guys, of course, know of flu, but many of you have never heard of RSV or HMPV or PIV. Those are all respiratory viruses that give you flu-like symptoms. So many times in your life you got sick, you thought you had flu. Well, guess what? You didn't have flu. You had another infection, but the symptoms are the same, respiratory virus. What we want to do is to get all of those products in a single annual booster, one shot, that will update every year for all the variants of flu and SARS-CoV-2 and all the variants that we need. And we believe we can prevent people to get sick, hospitalized, or dying from respiratory disease. And that's a huge deal because every year millions of people die because of viral respiratory disease. And we think we can impact that in a very big way. So that's the iPhone. You're going to get your iPhone every year in September, and you get your Moderna iPhone booster every year. So we're going to keep adding more and more apps for the virus, and we'll refresh all of those and update all of those every year. The second one is, and I was talking about a few people before lunch, is latent viruses. Latent viruses are viruses that get in your body, and once in your body, they're in your body forever. Some you know, HIV. The one you all know is HPV. There's a wonderful vaccine from Merck against HPV that every young man and woman should have, because if you get infected by HPV, you will end up having cancer. But there are many more that you don't all know. EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, the kissing virus, it's the mononucleosis virus. But in the long term, it drives a lot of leukemia. Most cases of MS are attributed to EBV. CMV is another one. Number one cause of birth defect in this country. CMV, cytomegalovirus. 20,000 kids a year, plus many miscarriage. There's no vaccine on the market. In the long term, CMV has a huge impact on cancer rates. And so we want to go after all of those and get those available so we can protect people. And then there's therapeutics. So we're working on medicines against rare genetic disease. We should have some data around the summer. So these are kids that are having wrong information from mom and dad DNA, and they cannot produce some critical enzyme in their liver. And the vision here is you give them an intravenous, it takes the mRNA into their liver, and they're going to make the protein that they are missing from their own DNA to have a normal life. Looks amazing in animal. Now the proof is going to be in the pudding in humans. So that's going on in kids. It has started last summer, starting to get a lot of data. In cancer, we have several drugs as well in cancer, where we try to help your immune system figure out how to go and eat your cancer. Because if we're healthy, we all have cancer all the time. Our immune system is here to go eat cancer. We have a super cool one that I love. It's a bit like science fiction.
This is the super cool one. Everything else has been normal so far, folks, right? That was all the standard easy stuff.
Yeah.
Now we've got the super cool one.
The super cool one is it's injecting mRNA in people's heart after a heart attack to revascularize their heart, because if you have a heart attack and you survive it, you will die of heart failure because your heart has been so damaged during the infarct that you won't be pumping blood very well. I'm sure Mike will help you with a device so that you don't die from heart failure, but if you don't have Mike's device, you will die of heart failure. And here the idea is we all have in our body, our body is an amazing machine. There's one human protein called VEGF, VEGF, sorry, all the gene names are pretty barbaric. And that's the protein your body secretes when you cut yourself. If you cut yourself and you bleed, you basically cut a pipe, and the blood is going out. If you don't quickly fix the pipe, all the cells downstream are going to die because they won't get oxygen and food coming from your blood. And so what does the body do? And I'm massively simplifying, so anybody who understands the biology, please forgive me. Is your body locally where you cut yourself makes a lot of protein called VEGF. And think about them almost like little flags calling for the saviors. And the saviors are your stem cell coming to make new blood vessels.
Yep.
And so we're using that technology that exists in your body. We did not invent that, God did, to use in your heart so that it's a one-time intervention. It has to happen, we believe, around 6-ish hours from your infarct. Like, when you have a stroke where every minute counts. And the idea, they will inject to you 10, 15, 20 times, depending on the size of your damage on your heart muscle. Mm-hmm. A single dose of mRNA, and then it'll be done. And when you look at the data, and AZ presented our data of a phase 2 recently at the American Heart Association last fall, you start to see a revascularization of the heart, where basically you build new blood vessels and you revascularize the heart. So that's, I think, is going to be a pretty cool one. We have some in autoimmune disease where we're trying to rebalance your immune system. Because if you have an immune disease, it's because your immune system is out of balance. So what if you could literally reboot your immune system? You might have to do it once a year, but to kind of bring back balance in your immune system, get rid of an immune disease. So that's one that Stephen, the head of R&D, is very, very excited about.
So those will probably take hours instead of 10 minutes to prepare. I was going to ask you, where do you think biotech is headed in the next 3 to 5 years? But it sounds like obviously Moderna and mRNA is a big part of that. But what else do you think is going to happen to biotech, and what should we be looking forward to sort of seeing out there?
Yeah. So I tell all my friends, make sure you don't die in the next 10 years.
These are the critical 10 years, because within 10 years...
Yeah, because, I mean, as many of you know, because many of you are part of it, I believe this is the century of biology. There's still so much we don't understand about the human body. But the pace of learning is not linear right now, it's exponential. Thanks to sequencing, big data. And so what is super cool is if tomorrow some scientists at Harvard or in Beijing or anywhere in the world,
Boston College,
a
good Jesuit school,
publish the function that a gene or a set of genes have, we can make a drug in 10 minutes. And that's a piece where you start to see the pieces of the whole life cycle of developing medicines coming together, that I believe biology has turned into an information business. So of course, we still have to do clinical trials, but things are getting better. I mean, who would have guessed several vaccines could be developed in 11 months from scratch? Nobody. When I remember being at the White House on March 3rd with President Trump, and I say, yeah, we should have a vaccine by the fall, and everybody thought I was nuts. But if you just look at the timeline of a best case scenario, if everything was going to be right and working well, that was possible. It didn't mean it was in the bag, it was possible. And that's where I think biology is going, and it's why this town is so exciting, because this is really the mecca of biotech in the world, as you all know. Not everything is going to work. A lot of things are not going to work. But what this town is going to create for serving humankind in the next 10, 20 years is going to be pretty awesome.
It's fascinating. I had someone tell me a couple of years ago, as we were talking about this community, that there were going to be more medical advances inside of 495 next 5 years than there have been in sort of the history of medicine in terms of advances. So I'm just fascinated about what's happening here locally. Look, I've upheld my time for Tony, but I really am hopeful and excited for the questions from the audience. So I'm hoping that people have some questions. I know we've got some of my colleagues walking around with microphones. If not, I got another 40 questions, but I'd love to open it up to
I think there's one.
Dr. Anderson.
Thank you so much. Really want to applaud you for all the amazing your company has done and made such a difference in many of our lives. And really want to sincerely thank you and your team for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's what has allowed us to be together like this today. Let me ask you this question, though. One of the things that happens, the type of disruption that we've experienced, is that we have the opportunity to learn. And I'm very curious, as we think about the process for drug development, to work with the FDA, do you really think there's going to be significant changes in those processes to allow many companies to bring drugs to market a lot more efficiently and effectively?
So the short answer is yes. Just remember, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm optimistic. But the answer is yes, both at the company level and at the regulator level, not only in the US, but also outside the US. By the way, the agencies around the world in the pandemic have worked so closely hand in hand. Whatever you would tell to the Canadians or the Swiss, the FDA will know within the hour and vice versa. I think there's a lot of things that we've learned and also a lot of things that we were lacking in terms of tools like digital tools. We're able to get the right data much faster through the company and through the regulators. Just for one example, in our case, we developed the vaccine with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, which is a pretty kind of boring way to do it. If you look at our current pipeline, nothing is going through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We are either doing a phase 1, 2, where we're testing different doses, first in a small number of people, and then when we have safety data, we're expanding it very quickly, get a bigger N, we can go into a phase 3. Or we do a phase 1, and when we have a dose, we do a phase 2/3, where we start by a couple sites where we do a couple hundred people to get a bigger N for phase 2 safety data, while we get all the other sites up and running across the world. And when we have an independent safety committee telling us, yeah, the drug is safe or the vaccine is safe, you can proceed, we go straight into a phase 3. So right there, we're saving time. If you just look, if we had done that in 2020, we could have shaved at least 6 weeks. And that would have saved a lot of people. So we made the point with Stephen, our head of R&D, we're never going to do a phase 1, 2, 3 in vaccines anymore. The other piece, too, is the regulator also learning about the platform because it's a brand new technology, as you know, and helping us a lot already in how quickly can we go to clinical studies based on what is known about the technology, because, again, it's the same chemical components in all of the vaccines. And so now what is good is not only Moderna has, 15 or 17 vaccines in the clinic, but data in 500 million people, which is a good N for safety. And so the dialogue is really moving on how do we learn and solidify that learning. And do I believe in a few years, with more data on more vaccine, the agencies will start to be more and more creative on how can we get product approved faster without taking more risk, because we can just look at bigger database of the same chemical components. I think so. So it's going to be a lot of hard work. It won't be a straight line because very few things in life are a straight line. But I think the direction of the slope is going to be very positive. Thank you.
You got a microphone up front, just for. Yeah.
This has been a great. I want to echo the sense of just sincere gratitude for the success. Same, what have we learned? Never a drug that was so effective. Is there learn from that, and what can we do to prevent that? Before 11-year-old daughter asked me if you could please make the vaccine not a shot.
So let's start with your daughter because it's the most important. One of the many things we're trying in the lab, it's still in the labs, is could you get the vaccine through just a little bit of a kind of in the nose? And it could be possible one day to get the vaccine without a needle. Yeah, that was one of the things that was kind of crazy in 2020, and unfortunately it stayed in 21. And naively thought it was, linked that it was, an election year. And I mean, I don't have a magic wand. I think education is critical from all of us, starting from, of course, what the companies can do to educate people. One of the things I'm super proud of is when we did the phase 3, we didn't have enough minority in the phase 3 study. And we were worried that some people of minorities will not feel comfortable that the vaccine was working and safe in their communities. And so we slowed down the phase 3 study, which, as you can imagine, during the pandemic was like agonizing decision, most probably one of the hardest one I made in 2020. Because we literally lost 3 weeks to launch, and knowing that people were dying and people were begging and waiting for a vaccine, just to make sure that we get great data in terms of minorities. And so I think a lot of education, social media, don't get me started on social media because I spent a couple hours, all the insanity that are allowed to propagate on social media is just kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy and sad, not only in the topic of a vaccine, but so many topics where the amplification that the social media is doing on everybody's feed and so on. Just disclaimer, I am on no social media. There was a big fuss a few months ago because I closed my Twitter account. And some people say, okay, what's going on with Moderna? He closed his Twitter account. And if I look at the data, I'd not used it for 2 years. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to just close it. And so I think we have all a huge responsibility in society to make sure that, how to make sure the right information is available to people, because in every topic of life, this is going to be becoming a big issue.
Pratt, get a microphone up here. Or do you have a question? Go ahead.
How much demand do you anticipate for boosters going forward? And do you worry at some point people will hit their max where they say, I'm done with vaccines?
So I think we're going to get into an annual booster. I think the piece that was the reason we need the fourth, I say we're above 50 years old, we need the fourth booster now, is because the vaccine that's still available is not the vaccine that was designed for the virus currently circulating. And so if you look at what happened over history, with the Alpha and the Delta, the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine held super well in terms of efficacy. But because Omicron was such a gigantic genetic shift from the original virus, the original vaccines were not as adapted. As we saw in the Omicron wave in the fall, winter, they prevented a lot of hospitalization and people dying, which was wonderful. They didn't do so well on infection, people to people, which where a lot of people got infected, which is why we're working with the regulators to get the new version of the vaccine and also to potentially prepare for the next variant, because nobody will know what the next variant is going to be. It'll be too easy. And so is the next variant a daughter of Omicron, a genetic daughter of Omicron? of Alpha, of Delta, or something coming out of the left field. And so what we're trying to do at Moderna is to do a booster that should be available in the fall that will have several mRNAs to try to get a very broad coverage. So whatever biology and life throws at us, we'll be able to provide you a much stronger and much broader protection than what happened with Omicron. Just to give you a sense, when I was made aware of Omicron the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we had a meeting with all of scientists, a Zoom or whatever, and we look at the structure and all the gene modification, and I'm like, this is bad, right? And my scientist is like, yeah, this is bad. It's like 30 mutation on spike. This is really bad. And at the end of a call, because we're focused on what do we do and so on, I asked the scientist, your wildest guess, how long do you think it would have taken to go from Delta, which was at the time, to that one? And they say, if you had showed us that one a week ago, and say, when do you think that one is going to show up? They say a year to a year and a half from now. There's just so many mutations. They thought they were going to accumulate slowly, and that the virus was going to drift slowly, and it just jumped. And so I think we'll end up going into an annual booster like flu. Again, as you heard, our goal is to get that into the same shot. So you only need one shot, and then we're going to keep adding more viruses. And I think the question is going to be, again, your age and your risk tolerance. As I tell people, look, I've been taking the flu shot for the last 20 years. Not because I was scared of being hospitalized, because I didn't want to be sick. Why do I take COVID boosters? Because I don't want to get long COVID. I'm not scared of getting COVID. I'm petrified to get long COVID. And so I think, but at 25, I have two daughters, they're 19 and 20. They got 3 doses each. Do we need a booster every year? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know because I don't have enough data yet. But I don't think so because young people have a very strong immune system. This is older people. And none of us has seen COVID as a teenager. So when you see a virus early in your life and you have a strong immune system, you make antibodies, but then they go away. But you have strong memory because you have a strong immune system. But the problem we have in this room, because most of us are older, is we don't have a strong immune system because we're getting older. And so what we need is the antibodies is our best protection. The problem is the antibodies, they go down over time. The problem we have, our generation, is that we've never seen COVID as teenagers. We'll never see it as teenagers. And so we're going to be stuck to get, if you don't want to get sick, get an annual booster and you'll be fine.
Brad, do you have a?
I have a question about your management style. You just completed a moonshot. And I'm sure it was relatively easy to incentivize and motivate your colleagues in the face of. But now that the company is turning this page, 220 new vaccines developing, how do you plan to keep that same energy, that same focus, that same attention as you make this?
Sure. So you are 100% right. Sometimes people ask me, what was your trick to be a super Uber CEO? Like, there was no trick. It was easy. Because as you said, the team was amazing. Never once I had to ask them to work harder or to do something on the weekend. People would just do things. The sense of duty was just phenomenal. So, look, since we started this company, we've always obsessed about one thing, is patience. And the way we frame it to people, which I genuinely believe, if we don't have the leadership to do something hard today, a tough decision, patients will suffer. I don't know if it's in 5 years from now, or 2 years, or 10 years. I don't know if it's a CMV vaccine because it will be late, or the VEGF cool drug in the heart, but people will suffer because of our lack of leadership. And so it actually in our line of work, I find it easy compared to people that work in other industries, which I don't know because I've never worked there, but I assume so. I only worked in life science. Is if we do the right thing, we're going to help people. And as I was with my IT team a few weeks ago, and I was pushing them really hard on getting a better performance, faster system, and all the usual stuff CEOs do. And I told one of our digital leaders, I said, do you know why I'm so obsessed about getting things done fast? And she almost, she was good because she was honest. She's like, sometimes I'm not sure why you're pushing us so hard. Like, because 4 years from now, 6 years from now, it might be your daughter who doesn't have a vaccine she needs. It might be your brother who doesn't have the disease, the product he needs because he has a heart attack. That's what you want to be able to look yourself in the mirror every day. And that's why I keep pushing and the team keep pushing, which is, I don't know who, I don't know for which disease, but somebody is going to suffer if today I don't lead. If today I don't have the courage to make the tough decision to challenge my team and to push the envelope. And that's the culture we're trying to keep. And as you say, with scale, keeping the culture is the hardest part. I'm not saying that because you asked a question. You could ask Tracy, she's my head of HR, and she's sitting next to me. And if you ask Tracy, what does he worry the most about? It's culture dilution. And I'm spending so much time on the culture, on who we hire, who promote, giving energy to people, taking risk on people. We just did a crazy thing. We gave all of our platform, all the technology, the operating system, to a very young woman who is amazing. But it was a crazy, crazy risk we took. But because she had been with us for 5 years, we knew exactly her strengths. We knew the pieces she was not ready yet, and we are helping her and coaching her. And she's doing phenomenal. She's bringing all of her brains out. She's fantastic. And so for me, it's really culture.
We are just up against the time, so I've got one last question for you. During the past 2 years, each session I've hosted, I've asked our guests to give us a message of hope, something that we can leave the room with, leave the meeting with some optimism from. You've given us a lot, a little bit of scared to make sure that we make it through the next 10 years, but after that we should be in good shape. But I ask you, as a parting message for all of us, give us some sort of message of hope to take with us today.
Well, I think the role of enterprise, for many, many years, a lot of people didn't like companies too much. But when you think about one of the biggest challenges I think we all face is the climate. I've been waiting for a long time for governments to do something serious about it. And I keep being disappointed around the world. I think that companies can play a massive role in terms of what we do with our companies. How do we educate, get the facts to people, to our employees and their families and so on. I think all of us have a huge opportunity to have a huge impact in addition to the business we run, to make sure that we do it as well as we can to minimize the impact on the planet. And that makes me very optimistic because I believe in enterprise and I believe in leaders. And I think if all of us do the best job we can for the climate, it's going to have a massive snowball effect.
Well, you've got the right audience for that. On behalf of Boston College Chief Executives Club, and all of our members, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.